Okay, hey Horace, how's it going?
Good day, Jake. I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very excited because what has just happened is that we just jumped on a call in order to meet one another. We started riffing on agents, and within 5 minutes, we decided we had to record it because it was
Let's
going to
record
be
this.
too interesting to leave it between us.
Well, it's April Fool's Day, and so I was like going to drop 50% of my stuff as like jokes, and then see if you can find which half are real and which half is
We
not.
should still do that. So where
And
are
you
you
just,
based right now?
I'm based in New York,
You are, okay, but where are you from originally? Australia?
Australia. So
Okay,
you might hear it in the voice, you may not.
I do.
I've been told recently, like I can't tell which part of the world you're from anymore. And I was like, I don't think I'm hiding it. I think it's just because you get immersed in American culture, you get immersed in American sounds, and you start dropping a few vowels here and there.
It's very true. You can't avoid it.
Yeah. But what about you, London?
I'm in Berlin right now. That's where I live. That's where I'm based. We operate out of, I wouldn't say London, the UK and Berlin. And so we've got team members across the UK, but we're hybrid. Our main
Mm,
office is in Berlin. I was there this morning. It's beautiful. I'm not there often enough. I'm there like once a week, but we'll sort that.
yeah, I love Berlin. We actually started off like way back when in 2018 when we first started this. We were working with a German company who was providing us with their embedding model and vector search database because back then those things were not open sourced. And then we worked together for a couple of years and they kind of like didn't quite keep pace with the market, so we moved on to other models and stuff. But I have fond memories of Berlin.
Well, I would love to hear a little bit more about Cynthia. Is that,
Ah,
and how do you pronounce it? Is it Cynthia? Is it,
exactly like that. Exactly like that. An ex-girlfriend who did, no, I'm
okay.
kidding. Like the girl's name. See,
Who
50% are going to be
really hurt
jokes.
you, who really hurt you, and then you had to kind of enshrine it in the name of a company. So
Right, right.
you started in
Unrequited loves and so on.
you started in 2018, and
Yep.
what were you doing then, and how does that differ from what you're doing now?
So I was actually a lawyer way back when. 2018, I had left the law firm for about 6, 7 months by then. I decided that before getting promoted, I was going to try my hand at running a business. And so I launched a event discovery app because 2018, everyone had 100 apps on their phones. And it was like Netflix for the real world. Learned what you liked. It used collective. Oh gosh, it's been such a long time. I think it was collaborative filtering to make recommendations, and launched doing pretty well. Then Facebook and Google both launched event finding apps back in November 2017, and we're like, wow, that was fun. And very quickly, just accidentally, even got into legal tech because a friend of mine at the German NLP company that I mentioned won a contract to look at 10,000 leases, and they called me because they didn't have any legal experts on the team. And very quickly, I was like, wait, you have a thing that understand the meaning of text? Let's use it for something other than date and name extraction. So that's how I got into it. So yeah, once a lawyer, got into legal tech by accident with like a 8, 10 month transition in between where I was running a events business.
And Cynthia itself, was that there at the very beginning? Was that there from 2018? Is that something that's emerged more recently?
No, it was there from 2018. So I mean, what we wanted to create was a KM solution. We saw this gap because when I was a lawyer, one of the hard things as a transactional lawyer was figuring out, well, what's the right precedent? Can I see a good
Mm.
example of this and use more than just keyword search? So very much like in the very beginning, it was trying to essentially create what DraftWise has.
Yeah.
And we released a tool that was doing that. But then within the first 6 months, I was demoing this to friends of mine, and one of them very kind of sharply said, hey, that's great. You can find out which provisions I can look at as reference points for my credit agreement, but I got to review 6 of these today. I just want to know what the F is wrong with it in the first place. And that's when we're like, oh, that's a much sharper pain point than going to search for precedents. So then we spent a lot of time figuring out how do we solve the pain point of what's wrong with this document in the first place.
And how did you tackle that? How did you think about that problem? What were the first steps you took?
We tried a lot of different things, and where we ended up was the most powerful thing that lawyers used every single day was document comparison. And it's a thing they trust, it's a thing they rely on. What they didn't have was a way to say, okay, well, this is different to one precedent. I want to see how it's different to 20 precedents and knowing what's an anomaly and what's not. So we very much focused on, we wanted to create a way to do multi-document comparison. And that led us down the path of, well, we can't do that unless we normalized all the data in the first place so that the data could actually be compared as like equivalent chunks. And then we stumbled into this problem of, oh my God, PDFs and docx just, they don't have any standardization. And we spent probably 4 years between 2019 and 2023 working on data extraction, not just data extraction, but literal text extraction, structuring them, normalizing them, etc., so that we can create a comparison tool. And then when we launched a comparison tool, it's like, this is fantastic, but actually lots of people just want the actual underlying data. So then this is where we've now come up with kind of a 3-product thing suite under our company. We've got a really narrow product for private funds lawyers. We've got a slightly broader product for multi-document comparison. And we've got a super broad product, which is the underlying data extraction and normalization, which then powers either people, clause banks, or LLMs. That's where we've ended up. So very roundabout journey, but all focused on what do we do to give lawyers data that they can look at and just trust.
See, this is fascinating. I was probing here because it's quite a similar journey to what we went on. So we had this process where we officially founded in 2018 as LegalOS. So like the last incarnation of the company before we became Flank in 2023. So we got together in 2017 as a company, founded officially in 2018, set out to solve similar problems to what you're naming, more for commercial teams though, or in-house teams at least, and to help with negotiation, to help with document review. We were looking at what's in the market already. There was, I think, Leviton, Kira Systems, all of the, you'll know these names, right? The last generation.
Old school first, yep.
Exactly. Thought River, really the first generation of, certainly of legal AI, using that term pretty carefully. And we kept hitting up against the same challenge every single time, which is that contracts are fuzzy. They're not
messy.
Computable by nature. They're messy. Yep. If we want a system that can treat contracts as computable, we might need to start way upstream of that. So we began building a system that helped you generate these agreements in a way that was computable. So our whole thing was computable contracts for like 2 years. And we're like, then the AI becomes a little bit of like a magic trick, because you can do AI, you can do like you can apply very intelligent logic to a logical, computable, well-structured contract that would look like the most incredible review AI imaginable if it's a computable contract. And if it's not a computable contract and you're trying to figure out if a particular provision is in there or what the cancellation period is, then with the old generation of AI, unless you've trained it on a massive data set of very similar contracts, it's going to perform pretty poorly. So this is kind of the path that we went down, and it meant that we ended up building between 2018 and 2020 a system we called Forest, which was this enormous tree mapping, like logic decision mapping app, no code app that enabled you to build essentially a computable blueprint for any contract type. And it would include all of these nodes that had backward propagation of logic, so that if this thing was included, you knew this thing was included, and certain nodes carried a value and other nodes carried a weight. And if one node was on, another node was on, and another node was definitely off. So there's all of this it was very much like, it brought me back to doing electronics. It's like an electronic circuit, except with backward propagation. So like a chip, but a very simple chip, but one that you could build as a lawyer. So this is where we began. And then from there, we hoped to enable lawyers, therefore, to do the kind of transformations on a contract that you otherwise couldn't do, like extracting data, like understanding what's in your contract and analyzing it against your playbook and everything else. The
Yep.
reality is that it ended up being used primarily for drafting for law firms for quite complex agreements like M&A agreements, because we could build from thousands of nodes, we could build almost endless permutations of a given contract without you needing to free draft. So there was some value there.
I think that's what Clauspace did, right? Like they essentially had all these building blocks that could be assembled into various contracts as well.
Yeah. I think it was roughly similar to that kind of thing. The reality is, though, what we found, and I think maybe we're seeing something similar. I'd love to hear your perspective on it. But
Mm,
we found that we were selling something that had a material productivity improvement to the law firms we were selling to. We're selling to mid-market law firms primarily,
mm.
but they weren't so interested in being so much more productive because they're billing out a really impressive rate. So standardization helped, making fewer mistakes, cutting down on the non-billables, but the real upside would have been for the people they are billing. And therefore, we never found the kind of traction that we hoped to find given the ROI that we were giving and that we're
Yep.
providing through the product. So it would, our product and others in the market at the time, who I won't name and shame, but they were primarily being procured for marketing purposes by the law firm so that the law firm could go out and do PR and say, we're using AI.
I
Now,
think that's still happening today, by the way.
exactly. What do you think about the flood of spend on legal software primarily within law firms, obviously?
Yeah, look, it's a trend that I think has been happening in waves. Like you have these law firms that go, "Oh crap, we got to spend money on AI so that we can seem relevant and seem like we're delivering value." But then ultimately, are they billing less? Are they producing more? No, they're billing more and producing the exact same amount. Sorry, law firms. I'm speaking highly generally. And I think this has sort of like happened with several technology waves. What usually ends up happening is that the in-house teams are the ones that are the ultimate beneficiaries and they adopt the tech themselves. And we've seen that happen a few times now. Luminous is a great example, right? Started selling to law firms and now sells almost exclusively to in-house teams. Some low-code, no-code platforms as well started selling to law firms and they found, well, hang on, the money's actually being made from the in-house teams. So there's kind of this progression, and I suspect the technology today are going to go through the same progression where the Gen AI platforms will go, well, the in-house teams can adopt us now. And I think it goes back to the law firm model where time equals money. So what are the levers there? Well, you can make people produce work faster. That doesn't help them. You can make sure that the work that's produced is of a higher quality and it's been done in the same time. That does help them. But then the entire market steps up. So then everyone ends up in the same boat again. So the whole like economic model is a messy one.
I was about to ask a question, and maybe I ask the question and give with it my own perspective on it, because I'm seeing something right now that I think is cool, and I don't know how excited I am about it. So let me put it another way. I think it's cool. I'm kind of excited about it. I don't know how truly disruptive it's going to be, and whether we're going to look back in 5 years at this trend as being the disruptive trend. And that is the trend of what Richard Tromans would call new mods. Now, these new mod law firms, to me, look a lot like Atrium. For those who are unfamiliar with Atrium, they were around in 2017, 2018. Justin Can founded them. He was, I believe, one of the Twitch co-founders. And his idea was, we found a technology company, we founded a law firm, and we essentially joined the two together in order for the law firm to get efficiency and productivity gains from the technology that enables the law firm to deliver a product either at a fixed rate or a much, much lower rate. Now, it didn't work. Justin Can came out, wrote a long blog post about it and said, I've given most of the money back, I believe nearly all of it, because the technology is not ready yet. We can't get the kind of efficiency gains that enables us to actually deliver meaningful price improvements while retaining margins. Now, new mods. What are new mods? New mods are AI native law firms. They're law firms that are being founded today, run like technology companies, backed by venture capital firms, but they're essentially a service with a human wrapper over AI. That's kind of a little bit of the premise for it. And there's a lot of in-jokes around that I think that we could make. But an example is that we have General Legal. If you were to procure their services tomorrow, they charge between $250 and $500 dollars per document review, or $10 per page, and you can look at their pricing on their website. If I were to engage them tomorrow, they're aimed typically at kind of scaling technology companies. They have customers like Clay and Lovable, or that might be Crosby, but they're similar market. They would have a lawyer sitting in my Slack, and I can communicate with that lawyer openly and send them documents, and they'll review it and everything else. Now, all of that sounds amazing, but I'm brought back to that price of like 250 to 500. I'm being a little bit skeptical here, but looking at their upper end, which is around $500 for a contract review, and the examples they give are DPAs, MSAs, NDAs. They're not complex loan agreements. They're not aviation loan agreements. They're not M&A agreements. So we're already seeing tools like Legora applying review to these types of documents, and I'm really wondering how much more effective these new mod law firms are, how much more productive they are than just a lawyer using Legora. And if they're not, then in what way are they defensible? What is the moat? In what way are they truly disruptive? Because we've seen Legora and Harvey, pretty much the whole AmLaw 100 are now users of, or at least buyers of, customers of Legora and Harvey. I would expect to see a truly disruptive new law firm leveraging AI at its core in everything it does to be selling document review at something more like $100 to $150 or below per document. So the fact they're not means that either they have enormous, insane margins, which then will be undercut very quickly, or it means that they're not able to be, they're potentially hitting some of the same issues that Justin can hit. And part of that is that the task itself in a legal workflow is only the tip of the iceberg of legal work. And there's a whole universe of non-billable work like time tracking. Technically, you might not have to time track if you're not billing by the hour and everything else, but there's a whole universe of non-billable work that is potentially a lot more time intensive than just grabbing a document that's a fairly simple document anyway, fairly routine document that you've seen 1,000 times before and running it against a playbook. So that's my like very quick teardown of new mods. And I would love to hear where you sit on that.
I'm going to give you my opinion by sharing a story. I was on the phone with a friend of mine who was a solo and is now joining a 10-person boutique. And we're talking about these new mod law firms. And I was like, so like, how does that affect you? Like, what are you using AI? How are you competing? And he goes, we've been doing that anyway. We just don't have a $10 million marketing budget. And it seems like that's the difference. New Mod is just a dressed up version of a small boutique law firm. And yes, they're leveraging technology, but so are small law firms. I'm not sure what the VCs are seeing in this. Or if they just haven't really researched what small law has been doing. Granted, I don't think small law is charging $500 per contract. So these new law firms are doing something different. What exactly that means, only they know. But my personal opinion is, yes, it's very much like Atrium, but the technology has advanced. So maybe now a lot more stuff can be automated. Has it advanced enough that you can remove a human from the loop completely? Not for 90% of work, but for the 10%, like NDA review, yeah, sure. You know, a good workflow can take care of it. But that's where the real margin is, right? Like if you want to do $100 per contract, it would have to be optimized in such a way. But you work on that stuff. You work on being able to use an agent to automate. So like, what are you finding as like the ceilings at the moment? How reliable can a no human in the loop system be?
It's a good question. And I want to ground it in a little bit of the problem statement first, so it makes more sense then as to how we tackle this problem and therefore how we think about reliability. Let's say, I think is the word you use. So the problem is that a lot of inexpensive work is done by expensive resources. That is the problem pretty much broadly across the whole of the legal industry, especially in-house, is that you're spending a lot of money, and then you find that great lawyers are doing sometimes snow shoveling type work, mashed potato, one of our customers called it. So how do you fix that? Well, either you offer a service that is just 10x better. I don't think new mods are. I think new mods are probably 2 or 3 times better, and that's probably being quite generous. But you offer services vastly superior SLAs and vastly cheaper and you probably need a long list. You probably want to take these new mods, go to their website, look at what they say makes them better and kind of multiply that by 5. And you're looking at that's truly disruptive. So you either need something that's 10x better, or you need to rethink the delivery model entirely of this kind of work. Our sense is you need to rethink the delivery model entirely of this kind of work, because if you have a new mod law firm where you have a bunch of lawyers using AI, whether it's their own AI tools or third-party tools, I'm inclined to think, why bother building your own AI tools if it's just the same kind of stuff that you could just procure with Legora or whatever? You still have expensive resources doing inexpensive work. Yeah, they're using a tool to do it, but it's still, we talked about this many years ago. There's blog posts going back to 2020 talking about this from many different people, which is the problem with the legal in that sense is that the expertise is tied to a human resource. Can't get it. Now we've got autonomy. We've got systems that can think for themselves and make decisions for themselves. Are they fully reliable for legal matters where your company could be exposed to risk and there's liability concerns? No. But then that's a problem downstream of autonomy. It's not downstream of saying the lawyer is essential and must be the user of the tool. I think that's the misunderstanding, the delivery model and how we're rethinking it. So our delivery model is the agent does the work, the lawyer checks it. That's our whole, every single thing that we've built through our platform is based upon trying to ensure that an agent does work fully autonomously. So it picks up the email, all the non-billable stuff as well, picks up the email, categorizes it, extracts it, double checks with the person if there's any open questions, files it in the right place, raises it with the right lawyer, does any time tracking it has to do, that it does all the work around the work. And then it has a really good first stab at whatever the work is it needs to do. We're not talking about it needing, I think it's a waste of time to try and get an agent to get to 100% right now, because a lawyer's going to want to check it
You're
anyway.
not going to get to. Yeah.
You're not going to get there.
Like, well, it's like when senior partners get a junior to do the work, and it's like, you'll get 60%. I'm going to rip it to shreds anyway.
Yeah.
But it's a first draft.
And that's okay. That's okay because it's a model that we have at massive scale already. And even a junior lawyer is an expensive, very well-trained resource. That's the crazy thing. Law is such an acutely expert field that even your junior first-year associate costs far too much to be doing the kind of work that you get them doing. There's a whole different argument about what should therefore junior lawyers be doing, and I've got a whole thing on that, but that's a different topic. For this particular topic, which is how do you get your inexpensive work to not be done by expensive resources? The approach I really truly think is you give it to an agent and you ensure that the expensive resources are using their time as effectively as possible. And that is in a supervisory capacity. That is sitting up as a partner would do or a much more senior member of the legal team would do in relation to a junior, and they receive the work and they also are tooled in a very special way. They're not just given the document to look at, but they're tooled where the right kind of checks are surfaced for them. So it says, here's what you actually need to check. Hey, I've done the work. I'm unsure about this. These 3 things you told me you always need to check. And this one thing's random. I've never seen it before. So they're doing 5 checks instead of having to, in the model that we're talking about, instead of having to load up, firstly, somehow receive it through Slack and then transmute it somewhere else and whatever else, and then get the document and load it into Word and load up Spellbook and do the review and go through the review. All of that stuff takes a lot of time because and you've got an expensive resource fiddling around with your AI apps that you procured. What? If I'm running a company, which we both are, I do not want someone I'm spending $200K a year for to be fiddling around with AI apps. I'm like, I want you to be, every minute that you're working, I want to be
You're
Super
either
effective.
building or you're selling. That's it.
You're building or you're selling. You're building or you're selling. And in the case of a lawyer here, it's like, are you proactively mitigating risk at massive scale, and are you enabling the commercial team? If you're not doing either of those two things in a really high concentration way, and when I say high concentration, I mean you spend 10 minutes checking a commercial agreement that has already been properly checked by an agent, and you're just doing the final checks of what the agent's done. That is high concentration impact versus the effort that you're putting in versus the time that you're putting in, compared to spending ages on all these back and forths and writing emails and loading up Spellbook, which is a great app, and all of this kind of stuff. So our whole philosophy is around that. Now, how far can you get depends on the contract, depends on the playbook. A lot of upfront legal engineering is really important. If you've got a very well legal engineered playbook by a really smart team who have seen it many times before, and you're working with a simple contract like an NDA, you are getting to the high 90s. If you're looking at an MSA or something where there's more commercial negotiation required, you don't want to get to the high 90s because you want that element of human judgment. But the way you want it is delivered to you on a plate where you're looking at the most important aspects of it, so you can really bring your legal expertise to help grease the wheels of the commercial negotiation, that you're not checking spelling, that you're not checking, is this critical provision included? So and an MSA, I think we say internally, we want to get to like 80% and leave the lawyer to check the rest. And that actually, that's kind of by design. And it's also, you want to work within the limitations of a system. You don't want to stretch the AI to breaking point where it starts kind of messing other
Hallucinating
silly
and
things
yep.
up that it doesn't need to mess up. And then with recursion and everything else, you can normally clean up a lot of that stuff with loops. But yeah, that's, I would say, a pretty sane summary of what we've seen is possible today. And we're not necessarily trying any harder than anyone else to solve like the doc review problem and to be more accurate than anyone else, aside from dumping 10x more compute at it, because we can afford to do that when you pull the expensive resource out of it. So if we pull the expensive resource out of it, give them a driving seat to sit in, a supervisory overview seat to sit in, so that you're actually saving so much money on these expensive resources because they're not being used to have to drive and pilot a co-pilot, if you get the metaphor, then
Totally.
you can dump loads of money at compute. So a run of our over review will cost $15-$20 and we don't care.
So, like the way you describe it, you're absolutely like dead on for selling to in-house teams. Like that's how they think about their budget. That's how they think about resourcing. That's how they think about like what the output should be. And I can totally see how a law firm would look at that and say, "Whoa, hang on a second. You're reducing billing hours and you're introducing a new variable into the whole mix. That doesn't really like fit the law firm model." And that's the tension we talked about a few minutes ago. I love the sort of like honesty that you have about the capability and the ceiling that the agents have, because you see a lot of people going out there saying, "Oh yeah, it's entirely autonomous. It can get it done. You don't even need to check it at the end. Send it straight out the door." And it's like, who's wearing that risk? Who's wearing that liability? Because we all know as builders, the agents are not there yet. Will they get there one day? Maybe. Maybe. I mean, we're working on something that will hopefully push it up higher as well. But we have no illusion that this is ever going to get to 100%. Like, at best, we think it might be 98, 99%.
Do you have a thesis that your approach, which is to, again, get the structured data, I mean, there's a few thoughts on this as well I have around standardization, but
Yes.
is your thesis here, get it more standardized and more structured, and then you're going to be able to deliver superior results, whether in partnership with another kind of review or whether through your own capability? Is that the hypothesis, or let's
So
say
the
thesis?
hypothesis, somewhat. The hypothesis is more structured data has historically always meant improvement in performance. Now, we don't know exactly where the ceiling in the performance is. So depending on whether it's 99% or 95% in terms of, this fuzzy criteria of 95% good enough, the user experience is really different. Like if it's 99%, I think we can knock out a whole bucket load of work that currently just need human review or human intervention. If it's 95%, then I think we've got to keep humans in the loop and make the system flag where there's uncertainty. So like depending on kind of the quality, the end result will be different. What our thesis really is that no matter whether you're using an AI or a human, structuring the data in such a way that they are standardized and normalized is going to yield a better result, even if it just means that for humans, you're displaying the results in a more consistent way. So you're putting the same blocks of text next to each other, even
And
if it means just that.
when you zoom out, so when you take talking about one document, I can see that quite clearly. I can already imagine like the knowledge graphs you might build from that, and
Boom, boom, boom.
exactly, and the opportunity of where to go from there, and ensuring that. I think the challenge I've seen in structuring data from a contract is doing that in a way that's consistent across all of your contracts, so you don't have several different types or taxonomies of within your. If you have two MSAs, you basically want to see the same kind of structure, data structure for them, so that they can be compared like to like. Do you, at scale, how do you think about Cynthia when applied to, let's say, a document repository? Because I think
Yeah.
really quickly on this, to kind of guide the question a bit, I want to lead the witness, is that I'm observing a lot of legal intelligence platforms who started with task execution now moving rapidly back into repository because they need to
Yep.
go up for CLM RFPs. And I'm thinking, well, this is all well and good, but applying AI to one document or 50 documents or 1,000 documents is very different from applying it to 5 or 100,000 documents or 1,000,000 documents. And that
Yep.
structured element is not only going to make it more accurate, I imagine, but also a lot cheaper. Like, are you already structuring data for massive sets of contracts, or is that to come? Where are you on that spectrum?
So we tackle at the moment what we focus on is what we're calling kind of the medium-sized problems, the medium-sized kind of data sets. And that means it's more than 10 because you can chuck 10 documents into a language model, or at least 10 documents in 10 instances and then amalgamate them somehow downstream. That's mostly solved. We're not aiming to tackle the 100 million documents in a repository. That's what Deep Judge is trying to do. And that's a large problem. But where we're trying to play is the 1,000 document problem. Okay, so you have 1,000 documents that are potentially equivalent and therefore indicative of what's market, which is something that transactional lawyers love to talk about. How do you then fit all of the relevant content into a context window for a large language model to synthesize, to then comment on? Well, that's a really difficult thing right now. So even solving that medium-sized problem is kind of where we think there's a gap in the market. So standardizing data will get us there. And the idea is the deep judges of the world can then refine and narrow down to here's the 1,000 documents that you need to think about this problem. And then we step in and go, well, to analyze those 1,000 documents, you really need to structure it. You can't just chuck it at 1,000 chatbots and hope that they can synthesize the information somehow. So this is kind of where we see the gap in the marketplace is. And it maps to human thinking because all of this right now has to relate back to the users ultimately. And users have no expectation that anything can process 100 million documents. But they do have the expectation that something can process 1,000 documents because that's what the partner holds in his or her head when they think about these problems.
That makes absolute sense. Do you therefore receive vendors, especially I'm thinking CLM vendors, but these folk who are beginning to introduce repository feature sets? Are they coming to you and saying, is there a way of plugging Cynthia somehow into what we're doing so that every document that is coming through the system runs Cynthia? If it's turned on, run Cynthia. I get the data extracted, and maybe there's some kind of field mapping that then pumps this into Agiloft or whatever it might be.
Yes, is the answer.
Okay.
So we're starting to have those conversations. There's different levels of maturity, right? You've got some folks who have implemented a Gen AI vibed solution and they're like, this will do. And for those folks, we kind of politely say, well, we'll see you in 12 months. Good luck with that. And I hope you succeed because honestly, if there's a cheaper, better solution, let's do that. There are some folks who are not yet ready because they've got a huge pipeline of stuff they have to build themselves and or want to do. And then there are folks who are ready, who've been looking at this problem and like, yes, we need a solution like this because it's been sought after by our clients. So different people on different parts of their journey. And what we're seeing are kind of two classes of problems. One is people who want to do multi-document analysis and review. So our super comparer was built for that. And it's a really nice plugin to do that multi-document review. And the other class of folks are like, well, we actually just need to get into one document and we need to go really deep into this document. And not only do we need to go really deep with the analysis, we want to be able to deconstruct and reconstruct. And it's the reconstruction that's a total gap in the market at the moment. You pull text out of a docx, how do you inject it back in a way that still respects the formatting? I saw an article by Harvey this week where they talked about being able to like use multiple agents to pull the text out without formatting stuff. And we're like, oh, that's cool, you've done that. But they didn't talk about some of the things that we know are challenging with docx. Like, okay, so you inserted a new clause. Where are you inserting that? Are you inserting a new line in the table? What's the numbering? All of that stuff that they didn't really talk about, which made us think maybe they haven't solved it yet. But it's that sort of like problem of, well, ultimately the tools are to serve the lawyers and the commercial users. And so whatever the output is has to be something they can use straight away. We call those on-ramps and off-ramps. So how do you match what their expectations are? So that's kind of what we think about, right? Like, we see ourselves as having accidentally stumbled onto this data product. So what do we need to shape it as that match the various needs in the marketplace right now and the varying level of sophistication of the builders and users are all over the place at the moment.
Yeah, and I can really see that with Cynthia because it's this ability to structure a contract and therefore 1,000 contracts, which I think you said to your sweet spot, is like a resource and it can be applied to so many different things. In fact, it can be applied to so many different fields. It could be applied to medical notation. You know, it doesn't, I'm using the wrong terminology, but it doesn't have to be only applied to legal. And that almost is like, it's a blessing. There's a wide net you can cast and it's broadly applicable. And maybe one day you can have an API and all the vendors are going to use Cynthia and plug in to Cynthia. And then you can deal with some of the challenges around the fact that docx is a moving target and we all hate docx for that reason. But yeah, it also means that finding that one killer use case and then that being very obvious and building the product around that and everything else, it becomes almost harder to commit in that sense. But it sounds like you found at least a thread that you're pulling.
It's a thread. It's definitely a thread we're pulling because, like I said, the market's all over the place. Like we were on a call this morning and someone said, oh my gosh, we have a insurance client, and the insurance company, whenever they are issuing new policies, it's not price that's the key driver. It's actually the T's and C's. And they have to assess, here are the 15 insurance companies who are putting a bid forward. How do they map their T's and C's? And there's no way they can do that right now. Like, aha! So like all of these different use cases that are historically very much manual, that right now, at least in the last 2 years, people have dumped into a Gen AI chatbot hoping it can give the solution. We're going, well, yes, they can possibly give you a solution, but let's be more structured about it. Let's be more clinical and surgical about it. Let's see, but different levels of maturity, different levels of readiness.
Okay. Look, it's been amazing. And maybe we wrap up with a couple of predictions for the rest of the year.
Ooh, I love crystal ball predictions.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because you can just delete it if you're wrong. And that's always what
Who's
I
going to
do.
hold us to this?
Throw 100 darts, you're going to hit the bullseye, and then you just, before your friends walk in, pull out all the other ones, and then you
so look at that. I got it.
So let's keep it fairly near term. So we're at the moment, this is the 1st of April. This will go out in a day or two. There'll be clips going out over the next week. Within the next 3 quarters, so by the end of the year, what do you expect to see in legal AI that we're not already seeing?
That we're not already seeing? Wow. Okay, that's a hard one because I think like the trajectory for the next 2 or 3 months is absolutely going to be more agentic, whether or not it's workflows or true agency. I think that's going to be the next 2, 3 months. Following on from that, I know Legora and Harvey are both pushing for stickiness, right? So all of the things that they're doing are keep your IP on our platform, keep your documents on our platform, bring your clients on our platform. That stickiness is going to be a key thing that I think vendors are going to push for. Law firms, I think, are actually pulling away. They want their data to be more portable. They want things to be, taken from Harvey into Legora or from Legora into Claude or wherever they want to put the data. So there's this kind of push-pull. And meanwhile, I think the ultimate beneficiaries of these are going to be the in-house teams, and they're going to say to their vendors, give us specific solutions that we need zero training for so that we can roll these out and see immediate ROI. And where I see the market going is more self-driven development. People building their own stuff, whether it's vibed out or workflows that are put onto one of these platforms. But that's all stuff we can see today. I think what we are going to be surprised at that we haven't seen today. One, I was saying this before the recording, I think a lot of the platforms will pivot to, we're not AI first, we're data first. So I think that's going to be a pivot in 6 months. And I also think that as people mature with the advances in Claude and with GPT and etc., there's going to be more differentiation by tacking on services. So, and I don't just mean forward deployed engineers, I mean actually solution providers inside of the platforms. And beyond that, who knows? But Jake, what are your thoughts on what we haven't seen yet that's going to be out there?
So there's kind of two verticals I would look at. The first being Legora Harvey. So Legora and Harvey have raised so much money that they have now a mandate to think bigger and bigger. Like they don't have a choice but to think as big as they possibly can. And the only directions they can go are more vertical, meaning, are more vertical and more horizontal. Let's start more horizontal because it's maybe less interesting and spicy. More horizontal would be to look at adjacent fields to legal, or fields that are kind of quasi-legal, compliance as one example, and to really lean in to have solutions for all of these different verticals within the kind of regulatory, legally type space. That's one way I think Legora will do that. And that's my sense. They have built a company that is very product led, and they've always had a very strong product. And I think they've won a lot of deals on that. And the users of Legora in-house, who I've started to hear from, all love using it, which I've found fascinating. I don't know about the ROI, but they all love using it. And I think therefore it can grow very quickly in these adjacent areas. Now, I don't think Harvey are going to do that. Harvey seemed to have been much more focused on really you being able to treat them like your big trusted service provider. And the service they're providing today are a degree of automation, a legal platform, a degree of data and knowledge and legal libraries and everything else. Now, I think they're going to probably start offering legal advisory. That's my sense. I think they're going to take on, yes, it would be cannibalizing their own customer base to an extent. There's probably a way they can spin it. There's probably a vertical they'll go after, like AI advisory, security advisory, whatever. But in order to warrant such an enormous valuation, there has to be a chunk taken out of the services market. And
yep, agreed.
I don't see how else you can do it, which leads me to like the second vertical, which is at the moment we see new mods and it's like, oh, big law would cost this and new mods cost this. And it's like, yeah, fine. But how many of the kind of customers who were engaging Crosby were using big law before? None, zero. No one's spending $2,000 for the review of an NDA. That is such utter nonsense. It's still a positioning thing, right? So I see a 2x2 where you've got software and services, and then you've got SME, or let's say scaling tech and enterprise. And the enterprise services market has not been tapped into yet by agents and AI. I've just said I think Harvey are going to somehow go there. And I think by the end of the year, we're going to see agentic services. I think we're going to see people beginning to outsource to supervised agents where there's no lawyer driving AI. It's not framed like a new mod. It's really there is an agent It's all set up, it runs, it does the work for you, and either you supervise it or the vendor supervises it, or law firms have a practice area that supervises agents. That's that's also my wish, because I think that is disruptive in a way that new mods aren't. And I think new mods are needed because in the lower end of the market, you need lawyers, you need advisory, you need that more traditional small law firm. Like we use a small law firm, and we've used fractional GCs, and we've used small law firms we work with seed legals. We've used small law firms for our M&A processes, our fundraisers. You need them. They're important. And often they're great. And the experience of working with people like PXR and all of these people in Berlin is great. They're great law firms. But up market do need something to challenge more ALSPs than big law. And I think ALSPs, I won't name them, I think they're nervous because I think they know it's coming and they're trying to do their own projects. But it's a bit of a cliche, but to steer a cruise ship is a hell of a task. So let's see which of us is right, and then let's delete the video if we're both wrong. But until
I love
that point,
your 2x2 matrix. That's really, it's a great way of analyzing and seeing where the gaps are in the market. And I also agree with you that Legora has always been product led, and Harvey has always been expertise led. If you look at their personnel, they are well suited to just switch over to providing services tomorrow.
Literally tomorrow. I would not be surprised. So let's see. Let's wait and see. But it's been a pleasure. I'm really pleased we could do this, and I like that it was spontaneous, and it's a long one, which is great. I like longer form.